I used to think change had to take months, new year, new me kind of stuff. But then life hit me hard and I realized I didn't have months. I had days. So I made a choice. 5 small habits, 1 week. And what happened? It wasn't magic. It was momentum. Today, I'm going to share those 5 habits that didn't just tweak my routine. They shifted me. If you're stuck, tired, or just looking for real change that doesn't need a miracle, this is your moment. You know, most people don't realize this, but the way you start your day is often the way you carry your day. It sets the tone. It's the first domino. And for a long time, I was letting that first domino fall in the wrong direction. I'd wake up, reach for my phone, scroll, compare, scroll again. And by the time I actually got out of bed, I was already behind on time, behind on peace, behind on as me. Then I asked myself something simple. What would happen if I gave myself 1 win, just 1 before 9? Nothing big. I'm not talking about running 5 miles or journaling through my trauma at sunrise. I mean, small, simple, achievable, like making the bed, drinking a full glass of water, opening a window and letting in some air. The truth is we underestimate how powerful the first thing we do is, because it's not about the thing. It's about the signal it sends. You're telling your brain, hey, I'm in motion. I follow through. I can trust myself. And if you've been in a season where you don't trust yourself to show up, that one little win becomes everything. I started by just standing up and making the bed. I know, sounds obvious, but it wasn't for me. It was symbolic. It meant I'm not going back to sleep on this day. I'm owning it. That took maybe 30 seconds. Then I drank water before coffee, before emails. I stood there and said out loud, this is my reset. Not because I needed to believe it instantly, but because I needed to hear myself take charge. That little 2-minute routine didn't change my schedule. It changed my identity. It reminded me, even on the hard days, that I was capable of doing something productive without needing to feel fully motivated. That's the thing we get wrong. We wait until we feel like it. But discipline doesn't wait. Discipline just moves. You want to start small. Here's something I've told people. Pick something that takes 2 minutes or less. Make the bed. Stretch for 60 seconds. Write 1 line in a notebook. Today I get to try again. Doesn't have to be deep. It just has to be done. That's the win. And once you have that 1 win, the second feels less impossible. You've already proven you can get momentum. You've already reminded your nervous system, we're safe. We're in control. We've got this. I'll be honest, it felt silly at first. Too simple. Like I was pretending to be productive. But that's what real change looks like: subtle, boring, and consistent. And I'll take boring over burnout any day. Because if you keep chasing extreme morning routines that you can't sustain, all you're doing is building a longer list of things to feel guilty about. But 1 win, you can do that every day, even on the hard ones, especially on the hard ones. And eventually those small acts start to reshape your story. You stop saying, I'm not a morning person, and start saying, I'm a person who shows up for myself first thing. That's not about hustle. That's about self-respect. And once I started leading with that kind of energy, the rest of my day followed suit. My conversations were calmer. My decisions were clearer. Not perfect, but better. And when I messed up later in the day, I didn't spiral because I had already given myself proof that I could start over. So if you're looking for change and fast change, don't overthink it. Don't wait for the ideal plan, the 5 a.m. alarm, the perfect playlist. Just ask yourself, what's 1 win I can lock in before 9 a.m. and then do it. Not to impress anyone, not to post it, just to build trust with yourself again. That's how it started for me. One win. 1 morning, 1 decision to stop letting the day decide for me. And that changed everything. For the longest time, the loudest voice in my life wasn't someone else's, it was mine. But it wasn't kind. It wasn't helpful. It sounded like, why can't you get it together? You're always behind. You should have figured this out by now. And I didn't even realize how often I was talking to myself like that. Because when it's internal, it's invisible. It just becomes the background noise we accept as truth. But let me ask you something. If someone talked to you the way you talk to yourself, would you let them stick around? Probably not. Yet we give that version of our own voice a front row seat. That second habit changed that for me. And it wasn't about saying affirmations in the mirror or pretending everything was fine. It was about catching how I was speaking to myself in the moment and asking, is this helping me or hurting me? That question alone started to shift the whole inner dialogue. I started to notice the language I used when I made a mistake. Before, it was automatic. You're such an idiot. Of course you messed that up, but I paused just once and asked myself, what would I say if a friend made this mistake? I wouldn't tear them down. I'd say, it's okay. You missed it. Try again tomorrow. That's not letting myself off the hook. That's just truth with grace. And truth with grace is what builds change that sticks. We don't realize how much of our day is shaped by our self-talk. You forget something and that voice says, here we go again. You scroll too long and it whispers, see, you're lazy. And when that becomes the narrative, it doesn't just drain your energy, it robs you of the ability to reset. Because if you think you're a failure, you stop trying. But if you remind yourself, I slip, but I'm learning, now you have something to build on, something real. I didn't want to lie to myself. I didn't want to sugarcoat things, but I had to learn that being honest with myself didn't mean being harsh. It meant being clear. There's a difference between saying, you need to do better, and saying, you're a failure. One calls you forward, the other keeps you stuck. So I started shifting the tone, not the truth, but the tone. Instead of saying, you always mess this up, I said, this part's still hard for you. Let's work on it. That might sound small, but it opened a door to try again, a door to self-respect. And when you speak to yourself with respect, your actions start to follow that same energy. Look, I'm not telling you to be your own cheerleader all day. That's exhausting and honestly unrealistic. I'm saying treat yourself like someone worth helping, someone who's doing the best they can with what they've got. Because most of us aren't lazy or broken. We're just tired of being at war with ourselves. And I'll tell you, this habit, it's not just for the quiet moments. It shows up when you're late, when you're triggered, when you're overwhelmed. That's when the real test happens. And if you've been practicing this new voice, this gentler, wiser, more grounded voice, it shows up too. Like a friend stepping in when your old patterns try to take the mic again. It's not perfect. Some days that old voice still shows up fast and loud. But now I catch it, I name it, and I remind myself, that's not the truth. That's just fear or stress or fatigue talking. Then I replace it with something real. I'm not behind. I'm building. I'm not broken. I'm learning. I'm not failing. I'm growing. And those aren't just words, they're anchors. You don't need to wait until you feel good about yourself to speak kindly. You speak kindly first and the feeling follows. That's how you rewire the default. That's how you create a version of you that you can rely on even on the rough days. Not perfect, but present and committed. If you really want to change your life in a week, change how you speak to the person you spend the most time with, yourself. One of the fastest ways I changed my life in that 1 week wasn't through motivation. It was through fewer decisions. Let me explain. Every day, we make hundreds of little choices. What to eat, what to wear, whether to go to the gym, whether to respond to that text or scroll for 10 more minutes. And the problem isn't always the choices themselves. It's how often we have to make them. Decision after decision all day long. And by the time we get to something that really matters, we're tapped out. That's called decision fatigue, and it will quietly wreck your consistency. So here's the shift I made. I stopped deciding 10 times and chose once. I picked my breakfast and locked it in for the week. Same thing every morning. Not because it was trendy or exciting, but because it was done. No thinking. No debating. I chose my clothes the night before, even if it was just sweats and a t-shirt, done. I set a time for movement, 15 minutes, and didn't give myself the option to talk my way out of it when the time came. I decided was oneself, so I wouldn't have to decide again. That might sound overly structured, but I'll tell you this, structure isn't restriction, it's freedom. When your mind isn't cluttered with micro decisions, you free up energy to be present, to reflect, to create, to actually feel, because you're not constantly negotiating with yourself. And if you've ever spent half your morning in that tug of war, should I do this now? Should I wait? Should I even bother? You know how draining it is. When I say decide once, I mean it literally. Don't wait until you're standing in the kitchen to figure out what's for dinner. Don't wait until you're exhausted to ask yourself if you feel like working out. That version of you won't make the best choice. But the version of you that's clear-headed and calm, that version can make a plan. And when the time comes, you just follow the plan, not your feelings. This doesn't mean you become robotic. It means you give yourself the chance to build habits without friction. Because when something is already decided, it becomes default. You stop asking, should I? And start moving toward this is just what I do. That shift in identity happens fast when the path is already laid out. I used to think discipline meant waking up every day and forcing myself to make hard choices. But real discipline, I've learned, is designing your life so that the hard choices are already made. You give your future self less to wrestle with. That's not laziness. That's wisdom. Let me give you an example. Before, I'd open the fridge, stare for 5 minutes, and end up eating whatever was fastest, not because I didn't care about nutrition, but because I didn't decide ahead of time. When I started prepping a single breakfast and rotating 2 simple lunches, I didn't just eat better. I felt better. Less guilt, less friction, more clarity. Same with movement. I told myself, every day at 8 a.m., you move for 15 minutes. Doesn't matter if it's a walk, stretch, or bodyweight exercises, just move. And because I wasn't waking up and debating with myself anymore, I stopped skipping it. It wasn't up for discussion. It was already done. This principle works in every area. When are you checking your email? Decide it. What's your wind down routine? Choose it. Even if it's just 3 steps, turn off the lights, brush your teeth, write 1 line in a journal. Choose it now, not when you're tired. Because when you remove those 10 daily what should I do moments, you free up space to actually live. You don't waste energy convincing yourself to act, you just act. And in that space, you start to feel your momentum build. Small wins compound, confidence grows, and suddenly you're not stuck anymore. You're moving. I'm telling you, this right here was one of the most powerful things I did. It didn't just organize my time. It stabilized my mindset. I stopped negotiating with excuses and I started following through. So if you're overwhelmed, tired, or just feel like life is too chaotic to make any real change, try this. Make fewer choices. Choose once and let that be enough. One of the habits that changed everything for me, and I mean everything, was movement. Not a full-on workout plan, not a gym membership, not a 6-week transformation challenge. Just simple, consistent daily movement. 15 minutes, that's it. And I know when you hear that, it might not sound like enough to do anything meaningful, but it's not about the minutes. It's about the message it sends to your body and your mind. I used to wait until I had the perfect conditions to move. Enough energy, enough time, the right mood, the right playlist. But the truth is, if you're waiting to feel like it, you're already losing the battle. Because the body craves routine more than it craves intensity. It doesn't need perfect. It needs consistent. So I decided no matter what, I was going to move for 15 minutes a day. No negotiations, no expectations, just movement. Some days it was a walk around the block. Other days I stretched on the floor or did a few rounds of deep breathing while pacing in my living room. It didn't have to be structured. It just had to happen. And here's what shocked me. It wasn't even the physical changes that hit first. It was the mental ones. I started to notice I was less irritable. My thoughts felt less heavy. I wasn't carrying the same tension in my shoulders or my chest. It felt like I was letting go of something every time I moved. That's when it clicked. Movement isn't about burning calories. It's about burning off the mental weight we carry all day. That stress, that anxiety, that overthinking, it lives in our body. And if we're not moving, it just stays stuck. But when you get up and put your body in motion, you're sending a new signal. I'm alive. I'm present. I'm in control again. This habit became sacred for me. Not because I needed a 6-pack, but because I needed a reset, a moment to shake off the mental dust, to get out of my head and into something real, something grounded. And the beauty of it, it never had to be complicated. The hardest part was just starting. But once I did, something shifted. I stopped making excuses because 15 minutes, I could find that no matter what. I could find that while waiting for dinner to cook. I could find it before my first meeting. I could find it even when I didn't want to, especially when I didn't want to. Those were the days it mattered most. When my brain was spiraling, when I felt disconnected, when everything felt like too much, that's when I needed movement the most. not to fix everything, but to remind me I still had a say in how my day went. And I'm not here to tell you what kind of movement you should do. That's up to you. Walk, stretch, dance, do push-ups, breathe deeply, and sway to music. It's not the type of movement that matters. It's that you're sending the message, I'm not frozen. I'm not stuck. I'm here. I'm moving. And that alone creates momentum, because here's what happens when you start moving regularly, even just a little. You begin to trust yourself again. You keep a promise and your confidence responds. You feel your energy lift and you realize maybe today isn't a lost cause. You breathe deeper, you slow down, you reconnect, and slowly you start to want more of that feeling. Not because someone told you to do it, but because you chose it. And I'll be real with you, there were mornings when I rolled my eyes and thought, what is 15 minutes even going to do? But I did it anyway. Not for perfection, not for results, for rhythm, because movement isn't about achievement. It's about alignment. And when your body is in motion, it's a lot easier to get your mind to follow. So if you're overwhelmed, stuck in your head, tired of feeling like life is running you instead of the other way around, try this move just for 15 minutes. Not to change your body, to change your state. You'll be surprised how quickly everything else starts to move with you. Let's talk about quiet, not just silence, but actual digital quiet, a space where your brain isn't being pulled, poked, and pinged every 5 seconds. Now, I'll admit, this was one of the hardest habits for me to build. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I was so used to being surrounded by noise, notifications, news, social media, podcasts playing in the background while I brushed my teeth. Constant input. And for a while, I thought that made me more productive, more in the loop, more connected. But what I was really doing was drowning in distraction. And here's what I noticed. When there's no space for your thoughts, you start to forget what they even sound like. Your own voice, your own instincts, your own sense of what matters, it gets lost in the feed. Every opinion becomes yours. Every crisis becomes your urgency. And before you know it, you're not living your life, you're reacting to someone else's. So I made a rule: 1 hour of digital quiet every single day. No phone, no email, no background noise, just me and the world undistracted. Now, I'm not talking about a full tech detox or disappearing into the woods. I'm talking about reclaiming 1 hour where I don't need to consume me. I can just be. And I didn't realize how badly I needed that until I finally gave it to myself. That hour became a kind of sanctuary. I'd go for a walk without headphones or sit with a notebook, not even to journal, just to think. Some days I'd cook or clean with no distractions, just my thoughts and my breath and the rhythm of doing something simple. And what started happening was clarity, not all at once. Not lightning bolts of insight, just this slow, quiet unfolding of thoughts that were actually edge mine. I began to hear the difference between urgency and importance, between pressure and peace. The truth is, your brain needs space. It needs boredom. It needs stillness. That's not weakness. That's wiring. We've been taught to fill every gap, every pause. We fill it with scrolls and streams and constant stimulation. But the most powerful ideas, the most grounded decisions, they don't show up when your mind is cluttered. They show up in the space in between. And this digital quiet, it didn't just give me peace, it gave me perspective. I started noticing how much of my anxiety wasn't mine. It came from whatever I had just seen or read. It came from things I couldn't control but had absorbed anyway. And once I cut that off for even 1 hour a day, I felt lighter, sharper, more steady. It's wild how much noise we accept as normal, how often we reach for our phones without even knowing why. And look, I'm not against technology. It connects us. It informs us. But if it's not managed, it will manage every you. And that's the part we don't talk about enough. You can't create a meaningful life if your attention is constantly being hijacked. This habit changed how I show up in conversations. I started listening more. I started catching the tone in someone's voice that I used to miss because I was half listening, half scrolling. I started feeling more in control of my time because I was no longer being pulled into 1,000 directions before I even had breakfast. 1 hour of quiet won't solve everything, but it will give you a chance to check in, to reset, to notice what's going on inside of you before the world gets its hands on you. And if you're not sure where to start, try the first hour of your morning or the last hour before bed. No rules, Just unplug and watch what rises when the noise settles. Because here's the truth. Clarity doesn't shout, it whispers. And you can't hear it if you're always tuned in to everything else. You want real change. Start by giving yourself the quiet to hear what your life has been trying to tell you. There's a moment right before change where most people get stuck. It's not because they don't want it bad enough. It's not because they don't know what to do. It's because they're waiting to feel ready. And I get it. I used to live there, right on the edge of a decision, telling myself, once I'm more confident, once I'm more certain, once I'm more prepared, then I'll do it. But here's what I learned: ready is a feeling, not a fact. And feelings are unreliable when you're trying to do something new. That's where the final shift came in for me. I stopped trying to feel ready and I started aiming for something much more honest. I asked myself, what's real right now? Not what's perfect, not what looks good. What's honest? That meant admitting I was scared to start, that I had self-doubt. That part of me didn't believe I could pull it off. But I stopped trying to hide from that. I let myself feel it without letting it steer the wheel. You see, honesty is what creates momentum, not pretending you've got it all figured out, not putting on a face, just naming what's true without judgment. I'm overwhelmed. I'm embarrassed. I'm starting so late. I'm tired, but I still care. Those are honest statements. And when you speak them out loud, even just to yourself, you take the pressure off needing to perform and you create space to move. It's not about lowering the bar. It's about standing on solid ground. Because if you build a plan on top of false confidence, it'll crumble the moment something shakes it. But if you build it on honesty, even if that honesty says, I'm scared, but I'm showing up anyway, that's stable. That's real. I had to learn how to start without pretending, to stop faking readiness and start respecting the truth. Some days that meant saying, I feel like quitting today. Other days it meant, I don't think I'm doing this well. And instead of stuffing those feelings down, I'd meet them with curiosity. Okay, so that's where I'm at. Now what? This habit, being honest instead of trying to feel ready, changed how I saw progress. I stopped needing to impress anyone, including myself. I just needed to be in the game, to keep showing up, to let go of the idea that it had to look a certain way to count. Some of my biggest breakthroughs didn't come from power moves. They came from soft truths, quiet moments where I said, this is hard, I'm still here. That level of honesty invites compassion. And once you treat yourself with compassion, the shame that kept you stuck doesn't hold as much power anymore. You're not waiting for confidence to start. You're second building it by starting, even while shaking. And what's wild is people can feel the difference. When you're honest about where you are, when you're not trying to impress or convince, it creates trust. It connects. It inspires, because deep down, everyone's tired of pretending too. You being real gives them permission to be real. I'm not saying honesty makes things easier, but it makes things possible, because you stop wasting energy managing a version of yourself you're trying to perform. And that frees up your mind to focus on what actually matters, doing the thing, one step at a time, imperfectly, but fully engaged. This was the final piece for me, the thing that allowed the other habits to stick. You can have structure, discipline, clarity. But if you're still lying to yourself about where you are, none of it lasts. You'll start and stop. You'll push and collapse. But when you move from a place of truth, even a hard truth, the progress is steady. It's grounded. So I'll leave you with this: stop trying to feel ready. That feeling may never come. Start with honesty instead. Tell the truth about where you are, and let that truth be the foundation for what comes next. If you take anything from what I've shared today, let it be this: your life doesn't have to change in a year to be meaningful. It can change in a week, not because of some breakthrough or miracle, but because you decided to show up differently. You gave yourself one win before 9 a.m. You learned to speak to yourself like someone worth believing in. You stopped making the same decision 10 different times. You moved your body even when your mind didn't want to. You made room for quiet in a world that demands noise. And maybe for the first time, you chose honesty over pretending to be ready. That's not a new version of you. That's this real version of you finally being given a chance to lead. And if 5 small habits can do this in just 7 days, imagine what trusting yourself could look like for the rest of your life.